Hello, welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and later on our podcast channel. Just a quick reminder to please like and subscribe to whichever platform you're watching or listening through. It's been a busy week in the world of Newcastle United. Well, a busy 48 hours. I'm joined by our football editor, Mark Dougas. Mark, it's never boring reporting on Newcastle United. The last 48 hours has certainly served up some talking points. We'll start where the only place we really can do is that Takeover statement from Newcastle United, in which they urged the Premier League to agree with them and to set up the arbitration so it can be heard in public, so we can all see what's going on and the evidence and what have you. What do you think this statement means for the prospect of a takeover?
Well, I think it's more of the same from Mike Ashley, really. You know, he is desperate for this to be seen publicly, because I think what he wants is pressure on the Premier League. He sensed, he believes that he's got a strong case, and he sensed some weakness in the Premier League. And I think the big message overarching all of this is that neither side of the buyers, so that's Mike Ashley, the consortium, which obviously includes PIF, they want a compromise. They want the Premier League to effectively remove the need for the arbitration by coming to some sort of compromise on the points that aren't in agreement. And they have applied so much pressure to the Premier League over the last year to try and do that. I think this is another sort of tactic to try and do that, because it's almost implying there was a few kind of malevolent little bits in there of that statement saying, I mentioned the European Super League, which I think is, hasn't got anything to do with the takeover arbitration. It might have something to do with why the original decision was, so heavily in favour of the maintaining the status quo. But that's Mike Ashley's belief. I think he is pushing at the door of there is a bigger, wider kind of collusion in football, where the Premier League are working hand in glove with the clubs right at the top of the Premier League, and he wants all of that out in the open. He wants this to be a cause that not just Newcastle fans are behind. He wants stuff to come out in the arbitration that gets other fans of other clubs outside the top six on board. So, it's a real pressure tactic. I don't believe that it will have any success in terms of getting the arbitration to be seen publicly. There is the risk that it sort of comes across as, another shot in the battle of this kind of never-ending takeover in Newcastle United against the Premier League. A few people have mentioned it smacks of desperation. I don't know whether it smacks of desperation. For me, it very much is a man who's fed up with having to jump through all the legal norms. Arbitration's pretty much always held confidentially. It doesn't matter which case it is, that they're always held confidentially. So, it would be extremely bizarre for a case like this, where there is potential for embarrassment of the Premier League to be heard publicly. So it's another pressure play, yet another kind of warning shot to the Premier League that, stuff could come out that could embarrass you. For me, it's consistent with Mike Ashley's approach to this. He's trying to rally the troops once more, and I think he's kind of been successful in that. They're trying to create some form of unity around arbitration and some more pressure on the Premier League, because I think that's the only weapon in their armory, really. It's, they're clearly warning the Premier League and almost the arbitration board that, look, there's a lot of people scrutinising everything that's happening here, and you need to make the right decision.
I mean, you would think it hasn't been done on a whim, that he's employed the likes of Nick DeMarco. So, and Nick DeMarco retweeted the statement as well. So it's been cleverly planned, and there will be an end goal. And what we're not too sure what that is. I mean, the end goal is probably the takeover going through, but this statement, there will definitely be a reason for it. Some people, though, and I kind of share this feeling, is that it's a bit of an ironic statement, calling for transparency, calling for openness and communication, when the last 13, 14 years of Mike Ashley and Newcastle United have been anything but.
Yeah, absolutely. And, only Mike Ashley could release a statement like this when his club has been, pretty much the polar opposite of open and transparent, certainly over the last 6 or 7 years. But Mike Ashley's got that kind of brass neck, hasn't he? It's not, he's sort of saying, well, transparency. His point, I think, what he's hinting at is there is a wider, like I've said, a wider sort of collusion between the clubs right at the top and beIN Sports and the Premier League to keep this takeover from happening because they fear that it's going to upset the norm. So his point is that is a much bigger deal than you not getting told who we're going to sign or what's happening or not having a fans forum or these kind of things, which is where he misunderstands Newcastle United totally, because actually, had you done those things, you think those things are nothing. You don't think they're important. But if you had done those things over the last 13 years, you probably wouldn't be at the position where you feel you desperately need to sell because you'd be on the Premier League gravy train, probably with a, with a club that was functional and all those things. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely an irony to the statement. But from Mike Ashley's perspective and from the point of view of quite a lot of Newcastle fans, it's like we've shelved that concern at the moment because we're all finally going in the same direction and we all want this takeover to happen. So Mike Ashley leaves and the consortium and the Saudi PIF take us over and take us on, and Mike Ashley's a thing of the past. I don't think there's a problem with pointing out both of things, actually agreeing totally with what Mike Ashley said. The Premier League, we're criticising Newcastle United for lack of transparency. The Premier League, for me, have been absolutely dreadful. Another no comment, obviously they're acting on legal advice not to say anything that could harm their kind of argument and their legal standing. But for me, they owe it to the fans of one of their clubs to at least talk a little bit more openly about what's happened, even if it's just the process. I mean, last summer, you couldn't even get the Premier League to talk about the dates, things were happening, who was involved, process. You couldn't even get them to talk about the process. Now, I think that's dreadfully poor. What you see is some journalists who are, have a little bit better contacts with the Premier League, have got a better idea of where the Premier League's point of view is. But it shouldn't just be down to somebody who's in the favour of the Premier League to be able to tell us why what's happened has happened. They should be communicating regularly with the NUST, in my opinion, and the club, and telling them what's happened, and then it should be felt with back to the fans. But unfortunately, they've had one meeting with the NUST, and that's pretty much where it ended.
Do you think Mike Ashley's statement was aimed at anyone in particular? Was it a kind of a sign to especially like maybe the PIF that I'm serious? I know you've heard it, but this is another sign that I am serious, and you're the only buyers for this football club.
Yes, I think there's definitely some of that. I think you have to view all of the statements through that prism. The thing that I think the two parties who are jointly together at the moment, so that's the Staveley Group, which comprises of obviously the Rubens and Amanda Staveley and PCP Capital Group, and Mike Ashley. The biggest thing I think they're petrified of is that Saudi AIF decide this is not worth the bother anymore. Marseille are interested in being taken over. There's other clubs in Europe. I think there'd be pretty much any club in Europe outside the Premier League would be desperate for the PIF to show as much interest in them as they have in Newcastle United. Now, so far, because I think this has been kept alive for the last year, there's no suggestion that they're going to walk away at all. Although obviously they've withdrawn the bid, they've not walked away from the partnership. And I think they would be desperate for this bid to happen now, knowing how much they would be pushing an open door in Newcastle from clear, like we've run several surveys. I think the NUST has run a survey, and it's well over 95% every time that say they're in favour of this takeover. We're in favour of this takeover. The Chronicle has always sort of said we back the takeover, so they know how much interest there is in it. But also, to know that Mike Ashley publicly is still pressing for it sends a message to them as well. And I think that's why they haven't walked away. That's why they're not interested, because if they felt that we'd all moved on from it, I think they probably would have looked at other clubs, because Newcastle's not the only club in world football, of course. So I think there is definitely an element of that. Yeah. And I've always felt some of this, everything that's being done, is being done with one eye a little bit on making sure the PIF don't walk away, because if they walk away, there's no deal. Because the other partners, well, the Rubens have enough money to do it, but they don't want to do it on their own for whatever reason. And Amanda Staveley doesn't have the money to broker the deal on her own. So, the PIF, the ones who are talking about long-term investment in the football club. So, yeah, I think that's really important.
We mentioned the NUST there just briefly. They released a lengthy statement in response to the statement released by Newcastle United on Thursday evening. And I, from my personal perspective, thought it was a really good statement. It sums up, I think, the situation. You can agree with Mike Ashley and Newcastle United calling for more transparency from the Premier League, while at the same time, as you've mentioned, Mark, also call on Mike Ashley and Lee Charney to be more open with Newcastle United, because at the end of the day, they could still be in charge of this football club in 12 months' time, and we'd still be in the same cycle of demanding a bit more transparency for them. And I thought the Trust's statement, which is on our website, you can find them on Twitter as well, was absolutely excellent. And especially the last couple of lines, which said, those with positions of authority and power at both the Premier League and Newcastle United continue to fail Newcastle United supporters. We need them to do better. What was your thoughts on the statement, Mark?
Yeah, really good statement. Like you said, I thought the payoff was the key, wasn't it? The Newcastle fans do deserve better. I think Mike Ashley knows that this is in some ways a bit of a smokescreen for what's actually happening with the football club. He's had another year of, in my opinion, clubs being stagnant. You see other clubs. I mean, I think Newcastle now that the director of football is in at Tottenham, there's only 2 clubs in the Premier League without a director of football or somebody at that layer of management. Newcastle show no interest in investing in anything off the field, and he's getting away with that because at the moment everybody knows that he wants to sell the club. Now, you could argue, as probably a lot of people would, that look, Mike Ashley's not the issue at the moment. We've got to get this takeover through, but there's nothing you can do to affect the takeover at the moment. We've done the letter writing, we've done all of that, put pressure on the Premier League through political pressure and now through legal pressure as well. We can hold Mike Ashley to account. We have held him to account for 13 years. So, I don't, I'm not suggesting that the biggest issue at the moment is Mike Ashley's lack of transparency, because that's just an issue that's been there for a long time. But why can't Newcastle United talk to us about things that actually are happening with the football club? Why can't Steve Bruce talk about transfers? Why can't we? We've had Castor today finally announced as the kit manufacturer, but financials are going to be another month late probably. There's one of only 2 clubs in the Premier League not to have published full financial accounts for last year. Palace have done it, and they've only done one sheet, but Newcastle are one of the only clubs, and that's the way it is every year. Every summer there's just silence from the club at the end of every season. There's no sort of regular engagement with fans groups. It feels like they're always quite far behind on recruitment and things like that. And that is the responsibility of Mike Ashley. He's still the custodian of the football club. And you would think that there would be times when they would like to kind of engage and talk about what's going to happen with clubs. But it's a bit like when they had the season ticket situation last season. They just shut down. Nobody said anything. Everybody was scared of their own shadow to actually come out and say anything about refunds, and it's just not good enough, but that's not new. The part I do agree with is the Premier League need to do better, and I do agree that arbitration should be in public, but it won't be, and that unfortunately is not peculiar to this case. It's just the way it is, which I think does all fans a disservice. Look at what's happening with Derby at the moment in the EFL. It's an absolute disgrace.
Few questions that we'll dive into. Firstly, this one from Gnunsman on Twitter. Do you think Ashley and the team had any expectation that the statement would produce any action?
No, I don't think so. I think what they're trying to do is, like I said, pressure, and also to unify the fan base, to try and get the fan base to take the fight to the Premier League again, and sort of write to their MP, do all these kind of things, and that's what he hopes for. But in terms of actually getting the Premier League to agree to hold it publicly, I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it'll happen. And I also don't think there's anybody that can force a private business. Arbitration is it's not a legal binding. It's not something that has any legal obligation to openness. And in that case, I just don't think you're going to get the Premier League agreeing to it. So, I think they knew that. So I think it's very much a pressure tactic.
Another question on the statement from Bennington 89. Is the statement from Mike Ashley positive or negative, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's a positive in some ways because it shows once again that this is such a live issue, and this, the takeover is there to be won. I don't think. I think if they felt that their case was totally untenable, I think it would have been dropped by now. So much money has been spent on it. Mike Ashley is not a. He's become very rich by wasting money on things, and I think he's there's been quite a lot of money spent on this so far, and I think with the aim of the wider goal of Newcastle being taken over, and now as a supplementary thing that he's after as well is breaking the collusion in English football. I think he feels there is a very big story out there and a very big issue that needs to be uncovered, which is that 4 or 5 clubs in the Premier League run the Premier League. Now that's his opinion. Obviously I'm duty bound to sort of say there's no, at the moment we don't have the hard and fast evidence to say that, but that's clearly what Mike Ashley is implying when he said dark forces in English football the other week. I mean, it was clear, that was an explosive thing to say about the people who run English football, and the fact that he's trying to do the trying to do the competition case in public, I think is again a clear feeling on his part that he has a really good case, and that there are things that will embarrass Premier League if they come into the public domain. So from that perspective, I would say positive, because it shows that he thinks his case is strong, which we've been reporting through the whole process.
So, I mean, we've got a question here from CLMA, and I don't know how to pronounce that, but there we go. Do you think this is the last throw of the dice for Mike Ashley, knowing he might lose arbitration? I guess with what you've just said, Mark, you're probably not at that point.
No, I don't think we're at that stage, and I think you've obviously got the competitions case that comes if they do lose arbitration. So that's what I kind of hinted at in previous podcasts, that this is a potentially long game. Even if they lose arbitration, that could still, competition case could still have a bearing afterwards. And I've seen people who know a little bit more about this than me saying that that could be that could have very wide-ranging ramifications as well. So I think we're in it for the long haul. I think even if he doesn't win arbitration, I think this will continue, and we could be looking at another year. We could be looking at going into 2022 if arbitration doesn't come off.
Darren Lee Wells on YouTube asks, do you think the Premier League got something to hide with them not wanting to go public, or even just commenting with them dragging their heels again?
Well, it's difficult to, it's very difficult for me to say. And obviously, legally, I would never say that there's any wrongdoing that's been proven, because there hasn't. At this point, there's nothing concrete to say that anyone's done anything wrong. We will find out about that through arbitration. And then the competitions case, that's Mike Ashley clearly believes that something has been done wrong and that they are hiding something because he wants it out in the public. So, from my perspective, without having seen all the facts of the case and without having seen the evidence, which is kind of Mike Ashley's point here, get it out in the open so that people can see what we're talking about, can see the emails or the phone calls or communications. And I think, to be absolutely fair to you, Andrew, I think your freedom of information request, was a very valuable thing, which I think, ironically, Mike Ashley's people and the court case, the legal people around it would have been very interested in that, because that was the first time we really saw any kind of correspondence pertaining to this deal from the Premier League. And while again there was no smoking gun there was clearly a feeling in there that there was that there was maybe things going on and a kind of flows of communication that we weren't aware of before, and that maybe informed us a little bit more than before. So if that's the case from a freedom of information request, you wonder what from full disclosure might come out. And I think that's the point that Mike Ashley is trying to make. And on that, I don't think there's been too many things that I've agreed with Mike Ashley on in the last few years. On that, I think I totally agree with him. This should be publicly available information. I think the same's true of the European Super League stuff. How much collusion was there between people in the game? Because I can't believe that the European Super League just appeared from 5 presidents or 5 owners saying, should we do this? They must have had some encouragement from some people in football. I think there's suggestions, isn't there, that Boris Johnson gave them some encouragement before they started. There was suggestions, I think, that FIFA were kind of on side with it a little bit more than they were when the backlash came out. So if that's the case and that's all been reported with the European Super League, you wonder what has gone on in the background with this. Clearly, Mike Ashley is hinting or trying to lead us to believe, look, there's some really, really big revelations here that we believe should be in the public domain. That's probably why the Premier League don't want him there, because they would say that, look, there's context to this, or our side of it's not going to be heard the same way. We'll never know until we see the cache of documents, which I suspect will never happen. I suspect all we will find out is generally what the decision is at arbitration.
A lot of people in the comments asking, as we get asked all the time, about a possible time scale. And I guess that also links into the fact of getting on to Mike Ashley, because if this goes on, like you say, Mark, potentially could go on into next year, or the loser or whatever, then Newcastle are left with a playing squad that still needs investment, facilities that still need improving. So it all depends, doesn't it? I mean, even if they win the arbitration as well, it's likely just to reset the owners and directors test rather than wave the takeover through, isn't it? So we've got all these elements playing along at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, if they win the arbitration, it solves the issue of separation of influence between the PIF and the Saudi government. It probably then gets into things like, can you link any of the people named as directors to things like piracy, which I don't think, the argument was always from consortium side that no single person who's going to be named as director has anything to do with any piracy. And so you'd have to wonder whether there might be some more questions at that point. But I think if this issue is solved, it would be then very difficult to block it, but not necessarily impossible. And we don't know where it goes from there. But it obviously makes it much more likely than it is at the moment, because at the moment there's no way through the logjam. I think there's bigger, wider issues here. It's obviously not started yet. It's only 2 days into July, but we knew it was July when arbitration is going to happen. So it could be any time in July. There was no timescale mentioned in the competition's case. That was the only time we found out that it was going to be in July. So we're waiting as much as anybody. We don't have an idea of the timescales, unfortunately. All we know is that it hasn't started yet. We'll probably know when it hasn't started, because you can be told that. I wonder whether the statement yesterday was a reflection on, there is the possibility that it could have been put back further, and that's maybe where the frustration comes from. And maybe that is something else that they're arguing around, openness and transparency, whether this is something that, they've gone around the houses with legally talking about, what's the obligation to kind of disclose stuff. But we just don't know. Unfortunately, none of us are in that position where we can kind of disclose anything on that. It's probably only a very few number of people who do know that.
Final question then on takeover and arbitration, what have you. It's Darren again over there on YouTube, and he asks, if Ashley fails, what happens next for the club? Do you think Ashley will try and make a go of it for the first time in 14 years, or do you think he'll do what he always do and just allow the team to be happy to just survive essentially in the Premier League?
I think he'll stay. I think he'll continue with his current approach to the club, which is keep it self-financing. Don't spend above and beyond what it is. So it will effectively be a race to kind of survive every season and then look to build on top of that. They felt that they were in a much better position to do that when around the second season of Rafa, or third season of Rafa, when he left. They felt that they were suddenly in a position where they did have enough money to start investing in the team. And obviously then the pandemic hit and revenues were cut, and now we are where we are, and probably the budget's not quite as big as it needs to be. I think he'll still look to sell. There are other buyers out there who are interested, probably just not with the kind of the sort of benefits to Ashley of PIF, which is one, that he'll get big profit in a time when football clubs are probably below the top six, probably not fetching the kind of money that Mike Ashley's asking for. But there are people who would take it off his hands tomorrow.
Just quickly then, Rafa Benitez, new Everton manager. A lot of people had hoped that once if the takeover got passed through, Rafa would return. Just your thoughts on that Everton job. I mean, I think it's a good opportunity for him. I know there's been a bit of a fallout from some Everton fans, the Liverpool connection, obviously, but he's a decent manager, and I think give him a project, it'll be quite interesting to see what happens, and I think he'll do a decent enough job there.
Yeah, I mean, I think so as well. But obviously, I'm kind of a big fan of Rafa Benitez and the way that he works. I'm never a big fan of clubs appointing managers that are unpopular, because I think it makes it very difficult for them from the start. Rafa could have a great first season, but if he has a bad start to the second season, which obviously he did with Newcastle, he's going to be under pressure. He's never going to be more than about 3 or 4 games away from being under pressure unless he actually goes in there and wins something or transforms them into a top 5, top 6 club. Then he buys himself some credit and probably, but if next season doesn't start well, he's going to be under pressure from the start. So I always wonder about making appointments like the one that they've made. But knowing Benitez, knowing how meticulous he is, how hardworking he is, how how much he puts into football clubs, I think it will be. It should be long term. They should be in a better position than where they were when they left. I had a chat with some of the guys at the Echo about this and said, you've got to think the problem for Everton is they've gone from Carlo Ancelotti to Rafa Benitez. So Carlo Ancelotti for them was their Rafa Benitez. They couldn't believe that they got him. And then they've gone to somebody who they're not sure about. Whereas for Newcastle, when Rafa came in, it was Steve McLaren to Rafa Benitez. And it was like, I can't believe we've got Rafa here. So it's a very different dynamic. And he's going to have to hit the ground running. He's not going to have the same sort of momentum that he did at Newcastle. He's also got a director of football there who might not allow him to buy the players that he wants, which was obviously a problem he had at Newcastle as well. But when he did buy players at Newcastle, they were the ones that he'd scouted, the ones that he wanted. So it's a very different job than the Newcastle one. Bigger challenge, I think, as well than Newcastle, because he was never under the pressure that he would be there. He did get a free ride in a lot of ways. The team got relegated under him. We know why. But they did get relegated under him, and he was absolved of all blame for that. He's never really even mentioned as a reason why they went down, but he was manager at the time. But I think he's a great manager, and I would sincerely hope that he does well next season. Apart from when they're at St James's Park and when Newcastle are at Goodison Park.
Certainly be interested to see the reaction. But yeah, I think the fact that he's going to have good owners who are quite ambitious as well, it's going to remove one of those security blankets that he had at Newcastle, where he could point the finger at Ashley, rightly in the most part, but he's not going to get that chance this time around, because they are ambitious and they do like signing players and spending money. On to the latest news then with the kit manufacturer for Newcastle. Castore have confirmed it, multi-year deal, whatever that means. I know you're not a big fan of that either, that term of phrase.
No, I just think tell us how long it is, because it would help to know. I mean, it's obviously, I think it's a long-term commitment from Castore. They are clearly here for the long haul. At least I would think at least 4 or 5 years. I would think that commitment is. I think the Wolves deal's 3 years, isn't it? So it'll be minimum 3 years, and there'll be no break clauses in it for the takeover or anything like that. It is a deal that Newcastle have got now, and I've got to be honest, I'm excited by it. I think when it first broke, Castore, I was like, who are they? I didn't know much about them. Did a bit of digging. There was a bit of controversy at the start about Rangers and the shirt quality and stuff. But now when you see what they're starting to try and do at other clubs, and when you hear them talking about bespoke kits rather than just off the peg templates, I think it's a good deal for Newcastle. I think they're a company that are clearly going to try and do things differently. I think Newcastle need that. Kits are massively important to football fans. I love my kits, and they're really important. And I think how disappointing has it been that when you look at some of the international kits for the Euros, some of them are just. I mean, they're all kind of much of a muchness, aren't they? There's not really any thought goes into some of them. I used to love the England Umbro ones. Were really good. They were all very different. This England kit's okay, but a lot of them, I mean, the Puma ones are pretty much the same kit, just in different colours, and that is what unfortunately tended to happen with Newcastle. Look, they did do things differently once or twice. They obviously brought back the green and blue. I'm colourblind, so I don't know exactly what the colour is. Green and kind of, well, it was like a kind of a green and sort of darker green or whatever it is. Kit the other week, the season, that was a really good kit. Then a lot of them have, there didn't seem to be a hell of a lot of thought gone into them. Some of them look good, but there's no marketing around it. Sometimes, they don't. There's a little bit of like, they announce it, they put some pictures out. Here it is in the shops. What I'd like to see is a real connection, like a way of kind of doing things at Newcastle where you're going to get the fans excited about it. You're going to do a proper marketing campaign, and that's exactly what Castore are going to do. They know, I think, how important the launch of this first team kit is. It will set the tone for the entire kind of time that they're here. It's got to be right. The quality's got to be good. The way it looks has got to be really good. And I think if they get it right, it'll be like the first day of next season or the second game of next season will be, you'll see kits through the stats. I mean, imagine if the takeover goes through as well. Like everybody in Newcastle will be wearing the Newcastle United Castore kit. You know what they're doing. They're not daft. But I'm really excited about it. I'd love to see what they're going to do. I've always been a big fan of kind of Puma stuff in the past in terms of their sportswear, but I don't, I think if you're one of the top clubs on there, you're Man City, you're a kind of like an Arsenal with Adidas or Nike and stuff, you get really good kits, you get their full attention. But Newcastle were in the next tier, and I feel like sometimes they got good kits, sometimes they didn't. But there wasn't ever really that connection between Puma and Newcastle that you had with Adidas, because of the way that Adidas had done things in 95, 96. Hopefully you can get a bit of that connection back. Not Puma's fault really, it's just the way the sportswear market is. They have a lot of clubs in their portfolio, and Newcastle weren't particularly big ones, so they according to them, so they did it how they did it. With Castore, it's like, I think they see Newcastle as the biggest opportunity for them in the Premier League right now. Obviously Rangers are a massive club. Wolves are, I think Wolves are clearly a club that are going places. They had opportunities to get a lot of other Premier League clubs, but they've gone for Newcastle. So I'm interested. I'm going to be really interested in what they do, and it's something quite different that Newcastle are doing, and that's all I kind of ever want to see is Newcastle doing things differently and trying to break the mold a little bit.
Most certainly. They said that the home kit will be first end of July, start of August, so hopefully just in time for the new season. Well, it'll have to be just in time for the new season, hopefully on general sale then. And also opening a store up in the city centre as well, Monument Mile. So bringing jobs as well to the city, which is a great thing to see as well. It's not just about the kits. A lot of people, though, Mark, talking about the connection. I say that in inverted commas. Obviously, the Reuben brothers have just bought Monument Mile. Nothing but a coincidence there.
Yeah, no, I think about coincidence really. I don't think it's got anything to do with the takeover. Might have a little bit more for you on that one tomorrow.
Brilliant stuff. And that's it from the Everything is Black and White podcast today. Please remember to like and subscribe, and head over to chroniclelive.co.uk to keep up to date with all the latest Newcastle United news.